Hello, thank you very much for joining us. I feel a little bit kind of on edge because I think I'm the youngest person in the room, or possibly and by far the most unqualified to be here. But what I do know is vaguely how to debate, so hopefully I can kind of guide us all through the debate today. Thank you, Alistair, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm the current treasurer of the Oxford Union, so I've seen one or two debates in my time, and that's why I was asked to moderate today. So the kind of format of the debate is how we're going to go. It's going to be a proposition followed by opposition on each side, respectively, with 8-minute speeches. And then after the second opposition speech, we'll open up to the floor for a couple of questions. If the questions can please be brief and to the point and directed openly both to proposition and opposition, and then each team will reply respectively in a short response. The speeches by each speaker shall be 8 minutes long, and then I believe you know how this works better than I do, but throughout the course of the debate, you've got, is it Sondico, is it the thing that you're polling on, so you can vote on your slider. It should be up there or something. It should come up. So that you can vote during prop and op. Obviously, you only have one vote, but you can change your vote during the process. So hopefully we'll see how persuasive everyone is, just how much the votes change. So a little bit of pressure there for the speakers. But I think you've heard enough from me. There's no point in me droning on. So I think with that, I'll introduce the debate. This House believes that mutuality is the best way to restore trust in the corporation, and I look to Conor Healy to open the case for the proposition.
Thank you. So our debate today centers around a few key ideas, which I'd like to briefly clarify before we begin. As a group, we've agreed upon a couple of points so as not to spend our time debating definitions. The first is mutuality. By now, I hope we all have a decent idea of what that is, but I'll refresh our memories one more time using words drawn from Bruno, Roche and Jay Jacobs' book, Completing Capitalism, which I recommend for any of you interested in further reading on the topic. Mutuality is the idea that business can simultaneously drive both profits and wider mutual benefits to people and planet through understanding and managing human, social, natural, and shared financial capital. By acknowledging that all four types of capital are inherently interconnected, mutuality is a business model that simultaneously promotes sustainable, profitable business and wider benefits in the form of human, social, and environmental well-being. So I think a good way to think about this is to use two counterexamples. Communism, for instance, places an emphasis on human capital at the expense of financial and natural capital, whereas our current status quo of business today places an emphasis on financial capital at the expense of human, social, and natural capital. So the economics of mutuality is about placing equal emphasis on all four capitals, and in so doing, maximizing the value of each. So, second point. So as not to get mired in the various legal definitions of incorporation, although I'm sure Sam, our resident lawyer, would love that. When we discuss the corporation, we mean business as usual in a profit-maximizing world. We may also use the term business interchangeably with corporation, but in both cases, we're not talking about certain entities like B Corps or social enterprises. So now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our opposition. According to Oxford Union debating tradition, I'm supposed to sarcastically roast them as I do. But that doesn't seem quite in line with the spirit of mutuality, so instead I think I'll be I'd prefer to be polite. So first up we have Nikhil, who is an amazing entrepreneur. He started a company back in India that is doing some really incredible work based on circular economy principles. So if you're interested in the circular economy, you should definitely talk to him. It's very, very cool stuff. So after Nikhil, we'll hear from Nikita, who worked at a social enterprise back in the US that delivered millions of dollars worth of healthcare to disadvantaged populations. She's also led international development work in Rwanda. She's amazing as well. So basically, Nikhil and Nikita have been out there saving the world in really, really inspiring ways. And then we have Sam. As I mentioned, he's a lawyer. He's also from Australia. So the first time I met Sam, and he told me that he was a lawyer, I'll admit I was actually a bit confused because I didn't realize Australia even had laws. Honestly, the first time I saw the movie Mad Max, I thought it was a documentary. But now I know better. I know better. So in all seriousness, Sam, I want to commend you. From what I understand, getting a law degree in Australia is really, really uncommon. And I'm pretty sure you're the only Australian lawyer in our class, I think. So I'm proud of you for standing apart from the crowd and forging your own path in life. Good on you, mate. So, Nikita, Nikhil, Sam, though your efforts will surely be in vain, I wish you luck. So, now, on to the actual debate. To begin the proposition's argument, I'll explain what we mean by trust, and identify whose trust has been lost, and explain why maintaining this trust is important at all. Trust is defined as the belief in the reliability or truth of something. As we debate the idea of trust in the corporation, we're not concerned with the reliability of a corporation to deliver on individual transactions. That is, the reliability of Amazon to express deliver an order to one of its prime members is not in question. We know Amazon does that reliably well. Instead, we're concerned with a much bigger, more important issue, which is the reliability of business to deliver collective prosperity, both for society as a whole and for the planet we must share. Trust in business, therefore, is the belief that it will make us all better off. Surely that should be the aim of any economic model we adopt as a society. And so the public's trust in business to reliably deliver us that prosperity is what it's at issue today. Now you may be asking, why should we rely on business to deliver more than a service or good in exchange for agreed upon sum? I will answer because we don't live in a vacuum, where each individual purchase we make is somehow isolated from the complex and interconnected relationships and systems of supply chains that bring it into your possession. Yet our current system of operating is set up to reward firms that most effectively exploit these relationships in a zero-sum manner. Our current system incentivizes exploitation over reciprocity. The higher the margins, the more profits a company accumulates, the bigger it grows, and the more power it has to even further exploit its relationships for its own gain. Furthermore, our current way of doing business doesn't account for many of the real costs of production and trading, such as the negative externalities on the environment. We should expect more of our corporations. They are too instrumental and too critical to our everyday lives for us not to. And I know for a fact that many of us in the room are getting an MBA and are here at this business school in particular because we understand the importance of business and believe in its power to shape the world in a positive way. Yet if you've been paying attention over the past decade, it is clear that the public's trust in business is waning. Colin Mayer started the conference yesterday with some statistics, which I think stated only about 36 to 38% of UK residents trusted business leaders. According to the 2018 Edelman Trust Barometer, 60% of respondents agreed that CEOs are driven more by greed than a desire to make a positive difference in the world. And 56% agreed that companies that only think about themselves and their profits are bound to fail. In a slew of countries, the US, the UK, Germany, France, Canada, Spain, Sweden, Australia, Japan, Russia, and Ireland, trust in business to do the right thing is below 50%. And this is significant because if the public's trust in business is irreparably broken, then like a bad romance, market-driven capitalism is doomed to fail. This may sound like hyperbole, but consider the recent wave of populism, both in the US and Europe. Yes, these are technically political movements, but it's not unreasonable to argue that this anger is largely a manifestation of economic despair, a feeling worn by many that our current way of doing business is rigged against them and has left them out to dry. We need only look back 2 generations to see how such feelings can erode trust in institutions and lead to dire consequences. So the corporation, as it exists today, emphasizes financial capital at the expense of human, social, and environmental capital. It has destroyed public goodwill, sowed distrust in business, and is starting to cause political unrest. So then, if we must restore trust in business in order to preserve capitalism, What is the best method? Marisha, Amanda, and I contend that mutuality is in fact the best way to do so, for 3 reasons. First, the idea of mutuality is a simple and intuitive one, rooted in common transcultural idea of reciprocity. This means it's an easy concept to understand and to remember. Second, mutuality incentivizes corporations to value human, social, and natural capital through the profit motive. This means it's fit for purpose and implementable within a business setting. Third, implementing mutuality makes corporate actions accountable and transparent, which in turn can strengthen the public's trust. Combined, these 3 elements create self-reinforcing cycles of reciprocity, which make mutuality sustainable and enduring. So I'll briefly touch upon each of these points, allowing Amanda and Marisha to delve into them more thoroughly. Point number 1, unlike other CSR initiatives, the economics of mutuality is a simple concept that is easy to grasp. It's a form of reciprocity. I don't benefit unless you benefit, and when you benefit, I benefit too. It's very simple and it's intuitive. We naturally understand because it's the way human relationships work. Second, mutuality doesn't ask business to be altruistic, nor does it inhibit the ability of a corporation to make healthy profits. Just ask Mars. They seem to be doing all right. Rather, mutuality is a model that reframes how a firm values its 4 capitals so that it can measure, account, and maximize each of them accordingly. It empowers a firm to realign incentives so that it can maximize its financial capital by properly investing in its human, social, and environmental capital. By actually leveraging the profit motive in service of reciprocity, mutuality is fit for purpose. And finally, mutuality provides a framework to put principle into practice. The theory of mutuality is implemented by using metrics to measure and manage human, natural, and social and financial capital. Measurement creates data and statistics that then can be made visible to the broader public. In turn, the public can use these metrics to hold corporations responsible. This process will lead to greater transparency, accountability, and ultimately trust. So in conclusion, the proposition acknowledges that mutuality is not the only way of restoring trust in the corporation. There are many other great initiatives, but mutuality is the most comprehensive framework. It's simple, fit for purpose, transparent, and therefore self-reinforcing and sustainable. I suspect that any alternative to mutuality that the opposition suggests is actually a derivation of or an idea that could be couched within the broader context of mutuality. So I ask you to hold them accountable to provide a more comprehensive, robust, and sustainable option. Thank you.
I thank the opening proposition for their speech and now look to Nikhil, Dugal to continue the case, to open the case for the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Is this working? Yeah, perfect. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that you've spent the last 2 days at this Responsible Business Forum, can I get a show of hands from those of you who are going to go back to your jobs and ask your accountant to start measuring 3 new types of capital? I'll wait. Okay. Mutuality in business is about reforming capitalism by changing our definition of capital. It's about reforming our current system that only values profits to also valuing people and the planet. This is an excellent idea that the opposition agrees with. However, we must debate on how difficult it is to reconcile mutuality with reality. My duty as the first speaker for the opposition is to introduce the members of the proposition as well. I'm also going to go be really nice to you guys. Starting with Conor. Conor Healy studied literature at the University of Chicago. Then he moved to Los Angeles and became a screenwriter and received an award for Young and Hungry Screenwriters on The Verge in 2012. So he's really talented at making things up. Marisha Nikhil studied economics at UCL and has worked in multiple countries. She has diverse international experience with a background in public policy and financial analysis, specializing in emerging Asian economies. I'm honored to be debating against her, I must admit that we've worked together before, and her true life passion is designing insurance products for puppies. Amanda Forman. Amanda specializes in teamwork, communication, and organization. As a third-generation South Florida native, she majored in biology at Florida Atlantic University and minored in spring break. Thank you. I wish you the best of luck as well. So coming back to the topic at hand, consider whether a company like Mars, in a mature, competitive industry, should keep open a high-cost plant that loses money just to keep employees working and prevent suppliers from going bankrupt. In a global economy, this would distort the allocation of resources while adding significant short-term local costs associated with plant closures. The proposition of this debate believes mutuality is the best way to restore trust in the corporation. I disagree with it being the best way. Consumers like us benefit when goods are produced at the lowest possible cost. Our economy benefits when unproductive plants are closed and employees move to new jobs with more competitive companies. Often, employees can't just pick up and relocate, but we all know that value-creating companies create more jobs. What is trust in business? It means that businesses are transparent. It means that businesses will pay their dues in time, and it means that they will uphold their corporate brand and values. Put yourselves in the shoes of a manager at an energy company currently invested in coal production to make electricity. How do the managers of a coal mining company make all the trade-offs needed to begin solving our environmental problems? If a long-term shareholder focus led them to anticipate future regulatory changes, they would modify their investment strategies. For example, they might not want to open new mines. But if the company abruptly stopped operating existing mines because they have a negative value in mutual economics, not only would the company's shareholders lose their entire investment, but so would the company's bondholders, which are often pension funds. How does this inspire trust? Regulation should lie in the domain of government and market forces. A better way to deal with fossil fuels would be to incentivize businesses to switch out of them by increasing the price of carbon or through taxation. Since these measures would apply to the entire ecosystem, a business would realign their investments to maximize value for their shareholders. Rather than enforcing a new definition of capital through mutuality and asking businesses to take on costs by measuring their impact, it would be more valuable if businesses focus on long-term value creation instead of short-term profit. How is accounting for mutuality well suited to fix this problem? When businesses forget the meaning of long-term value creation, the consequences can be devastating. For example, let's remember the financial crisis of 2008, one of the main causes for people losing trust in business, as Conor stated earlier. Short-termism in their thinking destroyed shareholder value. Their decision-making led to a global loss of $15 trillion. The proposition believes this is the outcome of businesses espousing the Friedmanic school of thought and maximizing shareholder value. In fact, it was the opposite. These incidents are not a reflection of a flawed model of capitalism. They are examples of investors forgetting the principles of long-term value creation, leading to devastating consequences. During the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s, all that mattered was getting big fast, and businesses thought they could worry about creating an effective business model later. When the laws of economics prevailed, as they always do, it was clear that many internet businesses did not have the competitive advantages required to earn even modest returns on invested capital. The internet might have revolutionized the economy, but it did not and could not render obsolete the rules of economics, competition, and value creation. The concept of mutuality intends to change these rules and distort business decision-making. Meanwhile, it does not provide us with a clear path to understand how it prevents short-termism in business decision-making. This does not inspire trust, but makes businesses more unpredictable and ultimately less trustworthy. The speaker from the proposition before me didn't look very confident describing what mutuality is, because I think he knows it's wishful thinking. So how can businesses be mutual and increase trust? The French economist Thomas Piketty has proposed a tax on capital, which would be a simpler way to help redistribute wealth rather than changing our entire economic system. This would work without distorting business decisions while preventing the concentration of infinite amounts of capital in a few hands. Another example is the B Corp movement, which is trying to transform capitalism by certifying businesses to meet rigorous standards of social and environmental performance. They do not claim to be mutual, but are working to inspire trust and have certified more than 2,500 companies in more than 50 countries. Why not take this approach of changing what it means to be the best business? The recent surge of interest in the circular economy has been born out of businesses and individuals realizing that they are literally throwing away billions of dollars of reusable materials annually. The clear case for profitability of the movement has motivated big businesses to bet big on an environmental initiative that fits into our current economic system. This achieved the same outcome that they would reach by conducting a P&L on the use of planetary resources under the principle of mutuality, but it does not require revamping our entire global economic system. The bus has left the station while mutuality is still making its travel plans. I would like to end by referencing Occam's razor, since Conor talked about mutuality being simple. When we're presented by competing hypothetical answers to a problem, one should select the answer that makes the fewest assumptions. When we compare mutuality with other simple measures like capital tax or the implementation of a circular economy, it becomes clear that mutuality makes too many assumptions and would make the operations of businesses less clear, decreasing our trust in their decision making. Thank you.
I thank the opening proposition for their speech and now look to Marisha and Naz to continue the case for the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition has tried to tell you many things. I am here to tell you why all of them are absolutely wrong. So, first of all, the opposition, I think, was either not having enough coffee or was not awake throughout the sessions yesterday and today, because a lot of the examples that they are giving is still looking at an extreme maximization of one of the four capitals. So it's in taking into example your coal example, keeping open a coal factory just because it gives people jobs is really maximizing the human capital. But what about the other three capitals? And that's really what we're here to discuss. How do you maximize all four capitals together? So obviously there was some, not enough coffee in the last 2 days. Second, the opposition has also suggested that external incentives might be a better way to build trust in businesses than internal incentives. But really, I think we saw the graph the other day that politicians are less trusted than business people, so I wouldn't trust them to really design any external incentives to make businesses more trustworthy. Third, thinking about tax. Tax really is a symptom to a problem, and just look at the number of where is Amazon's headquarters and how much tax do they pay? Apple, Google, all the big tech companies, we have a tax issue. As long as there are still tax havens, I think people will just move to where there are better tax incentives and not really stay where you're suggesting tax reforms should be made. And finally, B Corp, circular economy, gosh, those are such confusing and complex terms. If any of you can explain that to us in a succinct one-liner way so that people can regain trust in businesses, we will be most grateful. So I hope I have convinced you that every single one of his arguments is either misleading or wrong, and I'm here to build on Conor's points. And since I'm in a room of academics and also practitioners, I would like to stress that these points hold true in a conceptual level as well as a practical level. So let's start at the conceptual level. We believe that mutuality is the best way to restore trust in the corporation because it simply and intuitively reflects human values. I see all your faces going, why does this matter? Let me tell you. Trust is a fundamental human value. Therefore, to overcome the loss of trust, we need a solution which is human value driven. You might ask again, why does this matter in a business context? Did you know that the word corporation is derived from the word corpus, which is the Latin word for body or body of people? People are at the very center of business. They run businesses, they are employed by businesses, they live with businesses, and they are the consumers and the customers of businesses. So any loss of trust in business is really actually a loss of trust in people, and this is what we need to restore. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe mutuality is not the only way to solve this, but we do believe it is the best way. So, why do we think so? The concept of mutuality is fairly new, but we believe that its thinking and its philosophy actually backdate to 7th century wisdom. If you've ever heard of the golden rule, which is considered by the law of reciprocity in some religions. It is the principle of treating others as one would wish to be treated. The golden rule is found in nearly every modern-day religion, demonstrating how it transcends all other considerations and is an essential part of what holds our society together. We believe that mutuality as a concept encourages us to go back to these basics of what binds us together as a society. And therefore, it is our greatest hope in restoring trust in each other and therefore restoring trust in the corporation. So again, you might ask, why does this matter? 2 words, cognitive fluency. Cognitive fluency is the ease in which information is processed in your brain. If you want to convince people of something, if you want people to believe something, it needs to be cognitively fluent. All the other models that have been presented are overly complex, and it's hard for someone at a human level, no matter what your level of education is, to understand it. But we believe mutuality is different. We believe mutuality gives us the ability to cut through the cognitive noise and deliver something which is simple, intuitive, and humane. Okay, great. So I've proved to you why at a conceptual level, mutuality is the best way. Let's move on to the practical level, because I know most of you want to know, okay, but this sounds great in practice, but this sounds great in theory, but can we really do it? We believe that mutuality is the best way to restore trust in the corporation because it has SAS. It's simple, actionable, scalable, and sustainable. And we believe that this will breed corporations which are honest, reliable, and competent. Let me go through this list very quickly to try and convince you. First of all, it's simple. Aside from what I spoke about before, it is also simple enough to be implemented today in different types of businesses, different type of business models, in different type of geographies all around the world. You can start to implement mutuality today. You do not need to wait for an international body to set standards. You can do it today. It's simple. Second, it's actionable. Mutuality gives you metrics, and it gives business managers 4 very key levers of which ones they can push and pull to know what kind of business decisions they can make in their organizations. And people are already starting to do this, even though mutuality is not that mainstream. Think about some of the big tech companies. Why is it that they list their development team as an investment and not as a cost? Because they know that there is a return, and that is a form of capital, and that will be what drives their business into the new future, where in the new future we will value 3 things: people, planet, and the profit. And some companies already get this, and some companies in this room already get this, and they're already doing it. Third, it is scalable. Mutuality is not making a flawed system more efficient. We really don't need more of that. It is holistic because it takes into consideration all angles of the business, and therefore you can scale it up. It's not a one-off initiative, it's not a cost to the business, it's not the first thing that will be cut if we get into a recession. It truly gives businesses the chance to make this part of their DNA. Fourth, it's sustainable. We need to respect that the 4 different capitals have 4 different time frames. They have 4 different characteristics. And by thinking of all of them in parallel and all of them in parity, it allows the business to make more sustainable decisions. For example, some capitals have a more short-term time span than other capitals. By taking all 4 of them into consideration, it allows you to make decisions in a more sustainable manner. Finally, if you take out your phones and Google, restoring trust in the corporation, 8 out of 10 of the articles on the first Google search page will suggest that businesses need a purpose, and that will restore the trust. We believe that the SaaS nature of mutuality gives companies a great framework and framework and platform to actually operationalize whatever purpose or mission that they have. And therefore, it really is going in hand with the business thinking out there. So, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the SaaS characteristics of mutuality, as well as its simplicity and human value driven, will make businesses more honest, reliable, and competent. And in the end, that will be what will build trust. I'm not saying that's going to be easy. We have a long way to go, but we need to get started. And the best way to get started is to quit talking and start doing. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
I thank Marisha for her speech, and now look to Nikita, Srinivasan to continue the case for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, winning this debate should be easy because the proposition doesn't understand how taxes work. They are, in fact, simple and straightforward. Marisha, Howard would be very disappointed in you right now after teaching you business finance for an entire term. It's not going to get better. Listen, mutuality is great. We've just spent the last day and a half learning why. As business leaders, it's important to learn these buzzwords to prove that we truly have an MBA. We've heard a lot from businesses dabbling in mutuality or espousing its principles in some way. The thing is, there's a trend in these businesses. They're pretty much all family-owned or foundation-owned. And these businesses are great, but of the world's top 100 economies, 31 are countries and 69 are big businesses. Walmart earns more than Australia. BP is bigger than Russia. So when we talk about businesses, who are we talking about? Facebook, Apple, Tesla. When was the last time you Googled something? But I actually don't want to spare family businesses because I learned a few new things yesterday. Thank you, Professor Villalonga, if you're here. It turns out they're actually doing the worst on social and economic and environmental measures. And even worse, the only ones that do relatively better have their names on the company, so it's tied to reputation. Mutuality is great in theory, but it falls flat in practice. The family businesses that are making progress have a very clear selfish motive, and they're not the ones that have to contend with the shareholders or other externalities. These companies, the multinationals, are legally bound to meeting their stakeholders' needs, to quarterly reporting, and to keeping their doors open. Businesses that make up a majority of the global economy just can't use mutuality to restore trust. And even the ones that are doing it for their own reputation. What about that inspires trust? To respond again to Marisha, let's not talk about extremes. Let's talk about a few companies that are known for their mutual ways. An example we all love is Unilever. It's even public, and they're taking on a complex supply chain to achieve 100% traceability on crude palm oil. They also sell a product called Fair & Lovely in South Asia, the Middle East, and other places. Has anyone here heard of Fair & Lovely? Yeah. So it's a skin whitening product, and the name itself implies that the fairer or whiter you look, the better you are, which is actively used to discriminate against people all around the world. Yet, the Unilever Bangladesh website touts it as the #1 fairness cream. Vaseline, a sub-brand of Unilever, has just launched a Facebook app in India that allows users to whiten their Facebook profile pictures. I could go on, but I won't. Skin lightening is a huge and extremely lucrative industry. For women alone, the market valuation is expected to reach $19 billion by the end of 2027. Children aren't spared. An Indian readership survey in 2008 found that 12 to 14-year-olds accounted for 13% of the market. So shouldn't Unilever pull out of what is clearly a profitable but socially harmful product line? Why then are they only expanding it? On the other hand, if this product is making society happy as a whole, then selling it is actually abiding by the principles of mutuality. Is it actually improving social capital to sell Fair & Lovely? Per the current theoretical measurements of mutuality, it is. Forcing mutuality on a business forces it to act inconsistently, unpredictably. How much can you trust a company that has the personality of Jekyll and Hyde? The inherent conflict of interest in mutual businesses make them easy targets to ruin trust in the business. As Conor said, let's talk about Mars. They've done amazing work again in their supply chain to redistribute value, but their fundamental business is selling candy to children. Thank you so much for sponsoring this conference. So, if two of the biggest proponents of mutuality have some obvious hypocrisy and conflicts of interest in their business model, how could it possibly be the best way to increase trust? It's very dangerous to fight against the perceived evils of an existing system without having a fully fleshed out alternative. Just ask Uber. The thing about being a martyr for a cause is you sure as hell can't have skeletons in your closet. And unfortunately for Unilever, the skeleton is a graveyard and the closet is a $19 billion industry. If companies actually can't afford to be fully mutual, but tout it as the way of the future, it will only serve to erode trust in the business. In other words, mutuality will have the exact opposite effect. So, can businesses even be trusted? Are the businesses that run our world, that provide us with the goods and services that we have come to rely on, actually capable of being trustworthy? Or in a world of reality, a world where we have to report earnings and have commitments to those who invest in us, is there just an inherent conflict of interest? If there was nowhere else to turn, I'd be scared. But luckily, we have institutions set up to do exactly that, protected citizens. Why not let them do their job? The proposition argues that politicians have less trust than business. But the thing is, we've heard all day how we need to have governance, but no one wants to talk about government. What is this governance, less government that we're discussing? As we heard on a panel yesterday, businesses create value by providing goods and services. What's broken is a governance system that allows more money to be made in financial markets. If you're talking about alignment of incentives, what about a business that's supposed to sell things and a government that's supposed to protect its citizens? There's a clear alignment in one case and not in all the other. We should let businesses do their job and have better governance to punish businesses for not acting in the best interest of their stakeholders. Then we can truly trust a business because we know that their incentives are aligned with ours. If you're trying to create trust, there are actually other practical alternatives. Would you rather a company like, I don't know, Facebook, balance their environmental and human capital by ethically sourcing their supply chain and providing you with the maximum social entertainment while secretly selling your data to a theoretical Cambridge-based analytics firm? Or just be transparent. Report what they're doing, be upfront with their activities while seeking profit. Why not get certified as a B Corp that legally binds you to having to report on other metrics? Why chase a convoluted and theoretical path to trust when straightforward alternatives exist? And let's be real, mutuality ain't real. Not real, sorry, it's not new. It's real, but it's not new. Just to be clear. But if all these businesses have been mutual so effectively over the past few years, then why is trust going down? Why is it less today than it was last year? So to conclude, mutuality is a great idea in principle. In practice, it's only implementable in a small subset of companies, most of which are not bound by the existing capital structure. Mutual businesses are still unable to give up profit-maximizing practices, making it counterproductive to push this concept in the face of glaring hypocrisy. Finally, don't go chasing waterfalls. There are other solutions that are not counterintuitive or messy, and they're actually implementable. Thank you.
I thank Nikita for her speech. And now, since we're running out of time, I think if we just take 2 questions from the floor. So please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question directed to proposition and opposition equally. Or if there are none. So there's any questions that would like to be addressed to proposition and opposition? Well, one. Yes, lady to the left.
Oh, gosh. So I think my question is around the public and the role of the public, because this is a two-sided equation. Businesses sell things, the public buys them, and there has to be a shift on that side as well. So where do either of you, both of you sides, come down on that side of the equation, and how much responsibility do we have as individual consumers, investors, and users of these corporations, as employees, as other speakers have said this weekend?
So maybe start with proposition.
Thank you, Emily, for your question. So I think that as the public, the unfortunate reality is that a lot of times our decisions are already made for us by the corporation. And so even if we want to make choices that are aligned with sustainability and preserving the environment, we can't make those choices easily. And so I think that that's why the debate is central, is looking at business specifically, and then the interplay between business and governance, because we're in a circular, Nikhil and I are in a circular economy class, and we did a plastics challenge that Shruti referred to yesterday in her speech. And you basically, if you want to go waste-free for a day, it's pretty much impossible because the decisions have already been made for you by businesses. And so I think that long-term sustainable change needs to come from working on businesses and their goals and how they're executing. And then it will be easier for consumers to then make those choices.
Okay, well, it's me now. Yeah, so I think there's a few different ways you can look at it. I think one particular thing is that if you really want to make a change, get involved in politics, change the governance laws, make their if you want a bigger voice, represent your constituents more effectively. And the other thing is, again, part of why there's a big conflict of interest is that consumers want the cheapest or the best value for their goods, right? And so if you can find ways to balance all of that, then that's fine. But consumers, what their actual benefit is upfront is getting something at a price they can afford. Anything else, guys?
I'd say, essentially we do kind of agree with the opposition on this one, that most of the choices are already made for consumers. So it's actually really difficult to live a life, say, plastic-free. Because, like running a circular business in India, I myself failed to do the plastic challenge, for a day. Because it's just impossible to go grocery shopping without buying everything is wrapped in plastic. So I think with respect to this debate's topic and mutuality, mutuality actually is focused on the business perspective itself instead of from the consumer. And from businesses, they need to value the planet and people as well. But it kind of leaves out the fact that what is the decision making on the consumer end. And as Nikita said, the best way to really for people to step up is to get involved in governance, basically. Thank you.
Now, is there another question? Okay, to the lady.
I'd love to hear more about government, because we haven't actually heard a lot about government in the last day and a half. For each team, what is your vision of how government, or what role government plays in your vision of the future? So, how does that play out in mutuality? What role should government play? And for the opposition, you're suggesting that government should play a larger role. How does it overcome the challenges, the very big challenges it has?
You guys want to start?
Okay. So yeah, we definitely advocate for a bigger role in government. And what you see, and kind of what I said in my speech, you talk about governance over and over and over again, but you can't possibly expect governance to happen in a vacuum, right? It has to be through government. And you find that it is right now the model is very reactionary. So you have tax havens, but those tax havens that's been shut down recently with Apple and getting fined, all this stuff, and there's a lot of obviously politics there. But it's again this very reactionary thing where you're like, oh right, business can mess up. We should probably fix that. And so it should be something where you're actually And then another example is when they were trying to regulate Facebook, people were like, how do you email a WhatsApp? In government, and people are, and why does government know so little about the companies they're trying to regulate, right? Have those people involved, have an understanding of what you're trying to do before you realize that it's completely out of hand and now you have to back regulate and figure things out. Get ahead of it, predict things, understand what a WhatsApp is before you try to find a company that owns it, right? Those are the kinds of things that government can get really involved in a much more significant way. And that also, bringing it back to this, the concept of mutuality, is if you have these kinds of well-implemented, well-thought-through regulations, then businesses don't have things that they can do that are shady. They have to do things that are good for them within a specific confine. And that'll actually allow businesses to do what they need to do to keep their doors open and allow consumers to be protected, and everyone wins. It's great.
Thanks. So I think we're of the view that governments are very important and they definitely have a role, but it's not enough, right? So if we look at some of the most regulated industries in every country, let's take a look at banking. There are standards, there are particular rules they need to follow, but look at what happened at the 2008 financial crisis. Despite so much regulation in an industry compared to other industries which is so regulated, the lack of mutuality still led to a suboptimal outcome. And this is where governments and business have to work together. We can't just shove everything to governments and say that this is your job. The second part is, I think government and governance is not the same thing. You can have governance in a company without being dictated by the government. That is something that you can definitely do. And the third point I would make is governments are very local, but businesses are increasingly becoming international. So how do you take into consideration different rules in different parts of the world where different governments have different interests, but the same company operates with almost the same customers all over the place? So I would say governments do have a role. It's very important, but it's not enough.
Very quickly, specifically in the context of this debate, governments are fleeting. They change very quickly. And external incentives are never as strong as internal incentives.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for your 2 questions. Amanda, do you want that? And I now look to Amanda Forman to close the case for the proposition.
So before I was pursuing the noble profession of business, I was pursuing the noble profession of medicine, hence being a biology major. And it's an interesting contrast, those 2 things. So one of the classes that I took when I was a biology major, minoring in spring break, was an ecology class. And this ecology class talked about how the northeastern United States has long been known for its cod fishing. And Cape Cod and that whole northeastern United States relying on this industry. And a while ago actually, the cod fishery in the Northeast crashed. And there is no longer wide-scale cod fishing in that area. And there's some companies that made a lot of money off of overfishing, and there's some companies that self-regulated and didn't fish as much because they believed in preserving the environment. But all the companies went down together because the system was not rewarding the companies that had self-regulation, not rewarding the companies that showed self-restraint. And this is the issue that we're seeing right now. So the current system that we have incentivizes the profit maximization of only one form of capital. So it doesn't really matter if half of the companies in this room decide that they're going to balance all these different types of capital, they're going to take care of the world, they're going to take care of people, they're going to maximize financial profit. If 50% of the companies in the room don't do that, then they'll take the rest of us down with them. And so that's what we're talking about with this need for systemic change, the need to adjust the incentives in our system to say, hey, there's actually a lot of different things happening here. It's not black and white. That profit maximization is not merely financial. It's also human. It's also environmental. There's so many different nuances that we have to put together in order to really understand how to maximize profit and to survive together on this planet. So if we look at some of the things that the opposition has brought up, not quite as witty as them, there's a couple things that they talk about. So they talk about the need for transparency and how the current system and how we need to have like long-term benefits and long-term view. But this actually isn't a current alternative. This is basically saying what we advocate for is continuing as we are. And continuing as we are, as we know, is not working for us. It allows companies to exploit the environment and still be financially profitable. It allows companies to take advantage of the system while still being rewarded. And so this isn't really a good alternative. There have been really no models that the opposition that has proposed other than let's just continue as we are. And what we're saying is we can't just continue as we are. That mutuality and the concept of mutuality is the way that we can reform that system and move forward. The other thing that, thank you Nikita for saying this in the Q&A by the way, is that the government needs to up its regulation on things. That's a clear indicator of why we need systems change, because we do need different regulations and we do need different incentives. And so that's a clear indicator that the current system is not working. The current system is not incentivizing the right thing. It's kind of like why MBAs have CPA grades in classes, because sometimes we don't show up to class unless we're getting graded on it. So it's the same way in which we're, no offense. To those professors. So the thing is that like basically the opposition is advocating for saying, oh, we're just gonna say oh, students are going to show up to class without any sort of incentive because they care about long-term learning and future successes, instead of recognizing that that actually doesn't really work on most businesses. And one of the things that we talked about in our debate prep is that what you measure, you incentivize, and what you value, you measure. And so if we say that we really value the planet and we say that we really value people, then why is our current system merely incentivizing financial profit maximization and not taking into consideration that there are other forms of capital that also need to be valued and balanced in this system? And so if we really value those things, then our system needs to reflect that. Our system can't be this, like Nikita said, Jekyll and Hyde system where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we value the planet and we think it's really important, but yeah, we don't really care if you screw over the planet to make money and you'll be rewarded for that. And so the concept of mutuality and the idea here is that we need to realign these incentives. And I admit that the concept of mutuality is, in a sense, a complicated thing. It is simple and intuitive, but it is complicated. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the best way forward. So there have been plenty of inventions over the course of human history that seemed complicated, that didn't have all the details worked out, but ended up being huge innovations that changed the fabric of society. I mean, even things like the internet or light bulbs or the automobile. I mean, I'm sure in the initial stages when people were talking and dreaming about these things, it was like, oh, that's too complicated, that's never gonna work, oh, that's not gonna happen. And then they did happen, and it has fundamentally changed. And so I think that's where we as business leaders have a really unique opportunity to innovate for the future. So if we believe that mutuality is this concept, this fundamentally human concept, and not all of the details have been worked out yet, that's the opportunity we have to work it out, to look forward and say, this is important, and we want to see this work. And so just kind of to take a step back and look at the concept from kind of a macro level, I think that the idea of nuance and not a black and white system is what we're advocating that we move forward to. Marisha mentioned that this idea of reciprocity and the golden rule can be traced into so many different cultures and societies. The Prophet Muhammad said, that which you want for yourself, seek for mankind. Even in Hinduism, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. Confucius, what you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others. And of course, Jesus in the Bible, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And even in secular movements like effective altruism and others, we're seeing this idea that people are important, giving back is important. And yet, going back to this, our system does not reflect this value. Our system rewards people who do not take into consideration all four forms of capital. It rewards people for exploitation, or at the very least, it does not penalize them if they want to take advantage and maximize only one form of profit at the expense of the others. So we need a fundamental shift in the measurements and incentives of the way that we do things. And that is why the proposition believes that we need to adopt this idea of mutuality. Martin Luther King said it really well in a sense. He said, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. This is the interrelated structure of reality. The reality of it is we cannot rely on businesses to merely do the right thing because they want to do the right thing. We have to have a system in place that incentivizes what we fundamentally care about as human beings. And we believe that mutuality is the answer to that. Thank you.
I thank Amanda for her speech and now look to Sam Hilditch to close the case for the opposition.
G'day, I'm the lawyer. Now, the question we've been grappling with today, sorry, this is a bit small, can everyone hear me okay at the back? Great. The question we've been grappling today with is whether mutuality is the best way to restore trust, not whether we need a systems change or whether mutuality can solve all the world's problems, or whether it even makes us feel better about the way we do business, but whether it can restore trust. And I think that's something that's been critically forgotten about the proposition's argument today. Now, as the king of make-belief, Mr. Healy, defined earlier on, trust is firm belief in reliability. It requires consistency, and not consistency at theory, but consistency on a practical level. I mean, actions always speak louder than words. As discussed today, mutuality requires an equal emphasis on people, planet, and profit. And while this sounds really nice in theory and is probably something we do need, in practice, this is absolutely impossible to achieve when you're trying to manage social capital, human capital, financial capital. And despite our sort of opponents' fanciful arguments that mutuality is simple, and bear in mind that they've actually told you it's both complicated and simple, so how can you possibly trust that inconsistency? But they've also told you it's intuitive, it's human nature. And that is total bollocks. Now, bearing in mind that 67% of all statistics are made up on the spot. In a head-on car crash, the front seat passenger is 20% more likely to die than the driver. That's something that blew my mind, but all things equal, the reason why that happens is because at the last minute, as you're sort of heading towards another car, your deep-seated instinct is to turn away, you put yourself out of danger, and you end up putting the passenger at harm. Now, this doesn't make the driver of a car a bad person, and I'm certainly not advocating for the fact that human beings are selfish. I mean, every single day you open up a newspaper, you read a story about, your everyday hero without a cape. But when push comes to shove, the fact of the matter is that when we're put under real pressure, forced to make a choice, our natural instinct is to look after ourselves. And that's fine, that's human nature. It's our deep-seated response mechanism. And with this in mind, bearing in mind that people are the people who make choices in corporations, it's not some mythical entity, it's people. How can you possibly expect them to consistently and evenly and predictably balance people, planet, and profit with every decision they make? You can't, and nor should you. It's completely unfair. Now, say, for example, you're faced with a decision whether or not to withdraw your operations from a developing country, somewhere that really needs your help, arguably. Do you stay and support the local suppliers on the ground there and the few employees you have and hope for some sort of long-term reward for neutrality? Or do you leave, save the rest of your company and look after the thousands of other employees whose livelihood depends on your company staying afloat? What if your sole financial gain was completely linked to the success of that company? Or even still, what if you had a kid at home suffering from an illness and the medical bills are piling up? What would you do? And the thing is, it changes for every single person in this room, and with every little added nuance or complexity to the scenario, outcomes are completely different. And that's just natural. I mean, if you force people to juggle competing objectives, they're going to pick different things. Everybody's got a different priority order. And under a regime of neutrality, decision-making requires you to balance four types of capital in every decision you make. How can you possibly trust that will be done consistently? You can't. I mean, it won't happen consistently. And to make matters worse, and using I was going to go with board games, but using your fishery example, Amanda, once one corporation acts inconsistently or acts in a non-mutual way, I mean, whatever that means, any built-up trust in the system will fall apart in a chain-like reaction. I mean, everybody's played that game of Settlers Catan or Risk where you promise, form alliances on promises of truce, but the second it suits you, you backstab them, And the whole game sort of death spirals into anarchy and distrust. I mean, how can you trust that? That's the definition of untrustworthy, and that's exactly what mutuality will do. One corporation will step out of line at some stage, fight for themselves, and then everybody will just do the exact same, and we'll be exactly where we were. Now, without mutuality, you might not like the way a corporation acts, and it sure as hell might be damaging the world. But you can trust the way it's going to act. It's going to do whatever it can take to maximise its value. That's human nature. And to this point, do you really want to put corporations in charge of managing social, human, natural capital? Do you want, say, a KKK supporting businessman to be deciding what's wrong and right for the environment or people? Of course you don't. And that's exactly why that's exactly why governments exist. I mean, it's their role, people who are somewhat elected, to serve society and look after those key factors that drive us. No, it's not business. It shouldn't be. And I mean, all this is to say that managing capitalism through better political governance or regulatory change, like we've discussed, whether that be taxing revenue or better carbon pricing, or even increased liability, and I mean really strict liability for environmental damage or employee wellbeing, that is an unequivocally better way to restore trust. I mean, incentivise clean tech with profits and we might just survive climate change. Make social and, I'm really sorry, there's actually no point of information, but can I come back to you? I'll finish first, then I'll let you speak. Make social and environmental concerns concerns for corporations' profit, and they will respond in a consistent way. I mean, if you force corporations to make multiple different choices and weigh all these things up, I mean, it just adds extra layers of conflict of interest. Sorry, what was your point?
So initially, Nikita said people like Walmart are bigger than Australia, so some corporations are bigger than some countries. So why do you think governments are still the best way to restore trust in the corporation?
Well, I think I've just been harping on about that for a few minutes, but I mean, sorry, I'll speak a little louder, maybe it's the Australian accent. But essentially, I mean, you can deregulate companies, you can break them apart and make them smaller if that's what you want to do. Back to where I was. To conclude, I completely agree, and I mean we all completely agree, and I'm sure everybody in this room does, that the accumulation of financial capital has gotten out of control. I mean, it's so far overshadowed the importance of social, natural and human capital, the very things we live and breathe for. And do I think mutuality could, be the world's savior, solve all the world's problems? Sure, it's quite possible. But under no circumstance could this thing, whatever it is, restore trust in corporations, as it simply cannot be implemented consistently and predictably. It adds extra layers of conflicts of interest. The very thing that someone before scoffed that governance couldn't do this because of conflict of interest. I mean, it's exactly what mutuality is. It's bringing more conflict on. And I know we've all been basking in the glory of mutuality over the last few days, and I probably sound like the absolute fun police, the devil from Australia. But unless every single one of you can honestly say that you and every single person you know, through every decision they make, will consistently and predictably, without conflict, balance social capital, human capital, shared financial capital, natural capital, always, in every decision, you cannot possibly vote for this motion. Thank you.
I thank Sam for his speech, and I think we should all thank all speakers on both sides for their oratory and intelligence in all of the speeches they made this morning. Now, we've run over slightly, and people are still voting on the motion. So I think perhaps it's best if we move on to the summary remarks, and at the end, if everyone's had a chance to vote, then conclude who's best to win, as people are still voting and it's changing every second. You can vote as well, I think. Everyone can vote. It's very democratic.
Well, we are close to the end of our third edition of the platform, and I must simply share with you that I am deeply moved. And I usually don't need this kind of cards to speak, but I think I will need them, because over the last 2 days, I really sense something shifted in the atmosphere. And I've been personally working on this topic for the last 20 years, and today is a milestone. And I think the milestone is coming from the fact that I just realized who am I? And who are my people, my team, my company, that we should be able to stand before you. In Oxford, before business leaders, before the next generation of business leaders. Because really, everything comes from you. And what we have given you only comes from yourself. This is the core message of mutuality, which is an invitation, as we said several times, to be part of a network of reciprocal relationships. And it applies to every single human enterprise, to business, to education, to government, but also to capitalism. It's a natural law. And a natural law only matters if it's applied, if it's incarnated. And the economics of mutuality is a very simple, humble, and yet close to my heart endeavor, to bring this to life in business, in education, in policy making, but also in capitalism. And I think the debate is shifting as we speak, from the why we should do it to the what we are doing and how we are doing. Not only in extreme business conditions, but across main businesses. And it's my great, great joy, actually, that as we speak with Mars and also with the Mutuality group in Europe, there are dozens of pilots, actually, that actually are being implemented along these lines. And it's like small seeds of hope. And to quote Avishai, it's like small islands of sanities in a world of insanities. And the challenge is now to transform this into this good news, into a movement in business, in universities, beyond Oxford, beyond ESSEC business schools, beyond the Sciences Po in Paris, which we are partnering, beyond Mars, beyond the Mutuality group, beyond also the French government with which we work. And to do this movement, of course, we need each other. We need to partner with business. We need to partner with foundations. We need to partner with universities. But most importantly, we need to partner with your soul. And it gives me great joy, actually, great hope when I see the next generation of business leaders coming up. And I was sharing with Colin and with Martin, actually, I feel almost like that now I can see myself retiring in peace. But we have to remember who we are. We are made of clay. We are very fragile. We are made incomplete also. But we are also, each of us, a vessel for a special purpose. A vessel for honor and not dishonor. And Martin Persis picked on some Jewish concept this morning, and I've been passionately studying the scripture from my very young age. And I know that the definition of sin in Hebrew means to miss a target. So each one of us, we receive a specific target. As a group, as a family, as nations, as business, we receive a target. And the definition of sin is to miss a target. So I think it's time to reflect also, what is your target? Okay, what is your purpose? The platform we are creating later on this year with Mars and with Oxford is simply meant to be an instrument to help achieve this, the completing of capitalism. And beauty is in the journey, not in the destination. And if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So I'd like to finish with a simple call to business, to universities, to foundations, to existing and also future business leaders, to promote mutuality in your life, and also to be part of a movement to complete capitalism, to heal business, to heal the world. I just would like to now make a specific thank you to Colin and to Oxford. Thank you, Colin, for making this happen. Thank you for Mars. Thank you for the students. I hope I forgot no one. Thank you to Natalie, who has been the hidden architect behind this forum. I just want to finish with a great joy that you're giving me. These 2 days actually has been like a new energy in my life, which I would like to share with you and give all the glory to you, not to anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Bruno, for those words. Can I just start off by finding out, do we have a result from the debate? Can someone give us a result? I'm going to give you the result. Okay, so the motion is, this House believes that mutuality is the best way to restore trust in the corporation. The ayes got 34%, and the noes got 66%. So the motion is rejected. Right, well, I'd just like to start off by saying that, of course, you know that in Britain we don't believe in referenda. But secondly, I'd like to say you have been a fantastic class, a really tremendous group of students, and it's been a great pleasure to involve you in today. So thank you very much to all of you for the way in which you have participated. It's been absolutely tremendous. I'd like to thank many people who've been actively involved in organizing this event. And as you can imagine, this is an incredibly complex event to organize. First of all, I'd like to thank Helen Fletcher, who is the administrator who organized the forum and worked absolutely continuously over the last months on it. So thank you very much indeed for what you've done. And I've got something for you. How do I get out? Oh. Move it. Sorry. I'll just disappear. Scenery. Not for you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, I'd secondly like to thank Nathalie de Baudry-Dasson, who has been... No. Come on up. Who has been the main manager behind this program and put it all together. Nathalie, thank you so much for what you've done.
My great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thirdly, I'd like to thank Kate Roll, our remarkable master of ceremonies, though if I were PC, I'd describe her as person of ceremonies. Hold it.
Thank you, Colin.
And fourth and fifth, I'd like Alistair Colin Jones and Jay Yacoub to come forward as the Mars people, Mars Catalyst people. No, not for you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I'd just like to say that there are many people in the school who've worked with Helen in terms of running the program. Many of whom are here today, so thank you very much to all the administrators in the school. I'd like to thank all of the people on the Oxford side of the Oxford Mars team who've worked on this program as well. I'd like to thank all of the team in the Mars Catalyst team who've worked on this. It's been really great. And I'd also just like to ask Martin to come forward because we are extremely grateful to Mars for having been so supportive of all that we have been doing. And very grateful to your personal support to us. So thank you very much indeed. And is Shruti here?
Oh, yes.
Shruti? It's just as well you are here, otherwise I would have had to have gone home with the flowers for my wife.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I'd just like to say that in addition to the role that Mars has played in terms of speakers, I want to thank all of the speakers today and yesterday, the participants in the master classes, the many companies that have given a lot of time to contributing to the case studies that have gone on. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done. We're all very grateful to you for that. And I'd also like, with Shruti here, to again thank all of the student speakers and the debaters. It really was a fantastic occasion. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you for staying to the end, not going off to watch the royal wedding, and to thank you for having been such great participants. In particular, I'd like to thank the many people who've come from long distances to be here with us today. I'm personally extremely grateful to you for having done that. Thank you very much indeed. And now I give you back your Saturday, so thank you.